Hello, seafood friends! You're listening to Catch the Current, the coolest seafood podcast out there from the team at Undercurrent, bringing you everything from the boats to the boardrooms, breaking down the news, spilling a little industry fish oil, and sharing the sharp market insights you need to know. I'm Amanda Buckle.
And I'm Lorin Castiglione. We've got a special guest joining us this week, Josh Stoll, an associate professor at the University of Maine School of Marine Sciences and the co-founder of the Local Catch Network. The Local Catch Network just partnered with the newly developed USDA Office of Seafood, so we asked Josh to spill the fish oil on how the collaboration came about and how industry members can work to season change. But before we welcome Josh, we've got to talk tariffs again. U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war was top of mind and top of headlines this week as the Canadian government turned around on Tuesday, August 25th, and hit the U.S. with a 25% counter tariff on a long list of U.S. goods, including seafood. So we're talking about $27.6 billion worth of U.S. goods, including as many as 294 individual seafood-related tariff lines. Notably on the list are lobster, scallops, king crab, and oysters, as well as Pacific salmon and tuna.
Industry members were blindsided, particularly in the lobster industry, where crustaceans are sent from the US to Canada for processing. But in a surprising development, on Wednesday evening, just a day after announcing the tariffs, the Canadian government walked back the counter tariffs it was planning for US seafood products. Now, Canada's Department of Finance released a statement that, and I quote, "Based on feedback, we have made select adjustments to protect against broader economic harms, including removing seafood and fish products from our list of counter tariffs, while maintaining dollar for dollar and rate for rate response to US products." Sources told Undercurrent that the Canadian government's change of course came after provincial governments and industry groups like the Fisheries Council of Canada and Unifor, the parent union of affiliates such as Newfoundland and Labrador-based harvesters, and Plant Workers Union, the Fish Food and Allied Workers, pushed Ottawa to reconsider. So things got a little dicey there for a moment, with snow crab processors beginning to race to get product from the 2026 season across the border before the tariffs went into effect on September 8th. But everyone, at least in the seafood industry, can breathe a little sigh of relief, for now at least. Now, as promised, we've got a special guest hopping on the podcast. So if you've been paying attention to the US seafood policy lately, you may have heard a new name popping up, the USDA Office of Seafood. Cue the rainbow and, clouds leaving. The office was created this past April as part of the Trump administration's push to strengthen domestic seafood production and processing. And one of its big goals is to help make sure seafood businesses actually have access to the federal programs, funding, and technical assistance that have traditionally been designed with agriculture in mind. Now, earlier this month, UCN reported that the USDA partnered with the University of Maine and its Local Catch Network, which represents more than 2,500 members across fishing communities in North America. The network is going to help USDA get out into the seafood industry, talking with fishermen, aquaculture producers, processors, and other businesses, holding listening sessions and webinars, and importantly, bringing those industry concerns and recommendations back to the agency. Joining us this week to share some additional insight is Josh Stoll, an associate professor at the University of Maine School of Marine Sciences and the co-founder of the Local Catch Network. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks so much for having me.
So for our listeners who are not familiar with the Local Catch Network, can you tell us just a little bit about the organization and the members that are a part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Local Catch Network, it's anchored at the University of Maine, where I'm based, and it is a network of people who are working to strengthen local and regional seafood systems. When we first founded the network, it was only seafood harvesters, and then through time, we realized, actually, if we're thinking about food systems, if we care about the future of fisheries, we actually need to engage as many people as we possibly can in this work, whether you're a researcher or a policymaker or a chef or just an interested person. And so today our network is made up of people across North America. Many of them are based in the US, and they work on fishing boats, they are aquaculturists, they are researchers like myself, they are, you name it, people who care about the future of our food systems and seafood.
and people who are obviously very interested in this newly developed USDA Office of Seafood. So, what prompted Local Catch Network to get involved with the USDA's new office, and what does USDA specifically want the network to help accomplish?
Yeah, it's a long story, honestly. The network is celebrating our 15th anniversary, so which is a little bit crazy to say. We've been at it for 15 years, and
Congratulations, that's a big one.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're really excited about it. Yeah, the network is definitely one of my babies. And when we started this work, really one of the motivating factors was this observation that fisheries are often forgotten as part of our broader food system. When people talk about food, we often think about carrots and tomatoes, and seafood is kind of left out of the equation. And the idea behind creating the network was around connecting people who were trying to reimagine that, trying to recenter seafood as not just a commodity that we catch and sell, but something that is actually really important from a nutritional standpoint, from a community standpoint, from so many different perspectives that are part of our food system. And when the network first started 15 years ago, it was a bunch of people who were in the trenches doing that work, seafood harvesting, trying to figure out how to create local markets to connect harvesters to consumers. And it was really felt like swimming upstream. And fast forward to 2020 and the pandemic and sort of the disruptions in our food systems that happened, our work went from pretty niche to suddenly everyone knew what a supply chain was, and I think the moment that I like to share with folks was when the moment people went to the grocery store and saw that there wasn't toilet paper on the shelves, everyone suddenly knew what a supply chain was. And as part of that, people became really interested in this. Like not just like, oh, isn't that cute that we're
Mhm.
we're connecting people to their local seafood harvesters, but actually strengthening food systems is critical to community well-being, to resilience, to national security, and all these different levels of work. And started to have conversations about what if we were serious about system transformation? Like, what if, this wasn't just niche work, but we were really committed to system change? Like, what would that look like? And one of the things that we kept on bumping into was this observation that right now we have this very bifurcated way of managing the fisheries and food systems in the US at a federal level. On the one hand, we have our food system agency, the US Department of Agriculture, that focuses on farming and food systems. And on the other hand, we have the National Marine Fisheries Service that focuses on fisheries. But what they do is they focus on fisheries in the water. And the second they hit the docks, it's not their domain of focus. And the US Department of Agriculture says, oh, fisheries are NOAA fisheries work. And they point their finger. And so there's this kind of no man's land where
Yeah.
seafood falls. And so over the last 5 years or so, we've been beginning to build relationships with the US Department of Agriculture to learn more. Like, what is this big agency? How does it work? Where are there opportunities to build connections, to make the resources that are currently available to the seafood industry? And so we've been doing a lot of learning the last 5 years. And in April, when the Office of Seafood was established, we had the opportunity to connect with the new incoming director and have been fortunate to stand up a cooperative agreement to support the agency and the office, engage with the seafood industry to talk about the resources that are currently available, but also to help identify some of the gaps, some of the needs. And, it is a cooperative agreement between the Office of Seafood and the University of Maine, the local catch network, but I don't see it as a sort of a two-way relationship. For it to be successful, it needs to engage as many people as possible.
Yeah. I sometimes look at seafood as the redheaded stepchild when it comes to
Hmm.
like the USDA. Now, the way you described it, I'm like, I think it's like the forgotten child. I didn't realize that disconnect there.
We did a study a couple of years ago where we did an analysis of grants that USDA had given out in support of food systems. And we looked at something like $32 billion worth of funding, and only a half a percentage of that had gone to the seafood sector. And, I think I appreciate that analogy of like a stepchild, but I think it's also, yeah, I think you're right. It's also just who's on first. Like, oh, I thought somebody else was dealing with that. And
Yeah.
I think there's this really amazing opportunity at hand as the agencies are beginning to think about coordination and how we think more holistically about food systems to bring seafood into that conversation.
Well, the good thing that seafood has going for it is that there's a lot of passionate people in this industry. And I know USDA said it received hundreds of inquiries from seafood harvesters about program eligibility. So what are you hearing from the industry so far about, where the biggest points of confusion or frustration are, or what are you hearing that people want to see done first?
Yeah, so I think some of the work that we'll be doing with the Office of Seafood will really speak to that. So I think there's a lot for us to continue to learn. Having said that, one of the things that comes to mind immediately is that for a lot of people in the seafood industry, they have spent their careers learning and getting to know and getting to understand the National Marine Fisheries Service. And that is a lot of work to build those relationships, to understand how a big federal agency works. And USDA has been a black box that is actually quite a bit bigger in scale than the National Marine Fisheries Service. And so for a lot of people, just understanding how does that work? What's in it? What are the opportunities that already exist? And I think that's the low-hanging fruit of like help us understand the opportunities right
Okay.
now, today. I think as we get into it, my hypothesis or my sort of hunch is that we're going to learn a lot, right? Like there are a lot of unique elements of the seafood industry that may or may not apply to the terrestrial ag system. And so there will be a need for thinking about how does USDA adapt and to change? Whether that happens or not, some of that may be able to happen with pressure from the Office of Seafood, and some of that may require congressional intervention and changes at that level. That's not really our work. I see our work as really helping to set the table for those conversations so that the USDA is well positioned to make informed decisions about how to serve the seafood sector as best it can.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like the USDA, when they put out these press releases, it's always about farmers and identifying poultry, it's identifying beef, pork. It's never identifying seafood. And I feel like, yeah, just can't we just say also fishermen are welcome to join in on this? Is it that simple, And they just don't realize it. That's what I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I think it is and it's not. I think there are places where it is just a blind spot, where various requests for funding or technical assistance, there's such this long tradition of working with the farming industry. So that's the language, that's the lexicon that the agency has and that it uses. And so in some cases, I think that's it. That's the simple solution. I think there's some misinformation out there, both on the industry side and the agency side, sometimes too, that needs to be addressed. And then there are some bigger things, right? So, USDA doesn't have full discretion of how it spends its money. It's often dictated by congressional allocation. And some of the language there is very specific about who it can and can't serve. And so in some cases, as I understand it, the funding that is available or the resources that are available are very targeted. And so that would require action above USDA currently. At least that's my understanding of the situation.
And now, are fishermen, are they primarily looking for money, technical assistance, broader policy changes? Like, has there been like a theme so far?
Well, we will be doing a set of listening sessions. So we haven't started those. Those will happen later this year. And I think we'll be better positioned to reflect on what we're hearing. But again, drawing on my own experiences in the past and our experiences with the local catch network over the last few years, my sense is that the seafood industry is really at an important inflection point, right? And like what is the future of the industry? And various coastal communities are really struggling and to figure out what that sort of next iteration of the industry looks like. And I think it's going to require grant funding. I think it's going to require loans. I think it's going to require technical assistance. And it's sort of from my perspective, it's an all hands on deck, right? Like the industry is so diverse and it has
Yeah.
so many different needs. Some of it's research needs, some of it's technical assistance, some of it's direct funding. So, I think all of those things are needed. One of the messages that I kind of continually hear is just this, like, the farming sector gets it, why don't we? We're part of this system too. And I think there's a really great point there. Like, yeah, if we are going to think about this holistically, about food systems that really serve our country and the people in our communities, then we should be thinking about it as holistically as possible.
Okay.
And so there's sort of an equity piece in play here. We're still in the process of designing these listening sessions with guidance from the Office of Seafood, but my understanding so far and our engagement with the office is that they're coming into this with a desire to learn about the industry and their needs, right? What are the gaps? Where are the needs? Where are the priorities? And I think the best way to shape the future of this office's work is for as many people to weigh in and share their experiences, right? Like, you and I could sit in an office today and hammer out our top 10 priorities, but what do we know, right? And so I think this is really such an extraordinary opportunity for those in the seafood industry to share their perspectives. And it's a big task, right, for this new office to figure out then how to prioritize them and try to figure out, within the very limited resources they have, how to make progress. One of my kind of observations, this is Josh speaking, is that this is not the sort of first time USDA has brought different sectors into the fold. There is this long history with the aquaculture sector of bringing aquaculture into the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and that took a long time. And I think, that now USDA is the real home for aquaculture. There's also a focus of aquaculture and NOAA fisheries, but it has taken, as I understand it, decades to build that level of capacity. I don't think we can think about the Office of Seafood as an overnight solution. It's not going to be by September 1st.
The door's open. Let's see.
Yeah, like
let's do
I
this.
think it's
Yeah.
gonna. I think if we're serious about change and improvement and integration into the food system, like this can't be a 2-week, 4-month, 6-month process. Like, that's not going to work. There's going to be mistakes. Like, this is going to be something that is going to take a collective investment. And I think if those in the seafood sector are willing to engage, and if, to the extent USDA is willing to listen, like that's setting us up in a good starting point. I think patience is part of what will lead to success.
All right. So then, final words for people listening who want to get engaged then is I guess be patient, and then make a list of of your top 10. What should they do next?
Yeah, I mean, again, thinking about it through our role and trying to support engagement with the Office of Seafood, I keep on telling people, show up, like, be part of this conversation. And this is a really interesting opportunity to bring seafood to the center of the plate, if you will, in our food systems.
Well, that does it for us this week. Thank you to Josh for joining us. And if you're interested in hearing more about the USDA Seafood Office, just go to localcatch.org. They've got a page dedicated to the Office of Seafood. The fun continues with yet another guest next week. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.